Okay, Leah, we're back. I'm trying to put together another video for you so um, I can kind of be a little bit more efficient during the class time. I've already done a second layer of color on top of this particular drawing, so it should look a little bit brighter and a little bit more rich as far as color goes than it did yesterday. So what I've done is I've repeated the entire process again with the lightest green first, then the next one and the next one, exactly the same. This time I'm pressing a little bit harder, but if you really pay attention to what the paper looks like, the grain of the paper is still not completely filled up. So I'm going to go over the brightest sections again with white, and really here I'm just kind of like blending, starting to use the white as my blender. So I'm kind of blending in some of the layers that I've already put down, and I'm also going back in and I'm brightening up the areas that originally needed it. So I'm getting closer to filling in here, but like I said, that was after 2 layers of color. I really think that at least you're going to want a third layer, at least. And again, it matters on how hard you're pressing, and there's nothing wrong with having to go over it even again to add even more depth to it as far as the colors go. But again, repeating the process, working lightly at first, allows you to always come back and be able to, it sort of fix things and or add a little bit more. Whereas if you press down a little bit too hard in the beginning, once that paper gets smoothed out, what they call it burnished, which means like it's really like you don't see the texture anymore, it's all just wax. Well, that waxy level just really becomes sort of unworkable and you can't really add more to it. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just again adding just a little bit more white. Some of this white, I'm going over some of the areas where I've layered a couple shades of green, and that the white is going to kind of serve almost as my blender. And do a little bit on the cheek, and then I'm going to basically just do another layer of color for you. Let's see how that goes. If I can speed up the video, I will, but I'm just going to kind of focus in right now on working. I don't think you need any more commentary. I'm going to do my third layer of color on top of this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of the detail stuff with my darkest green and kind of get at least the face part to the finished thing. Now, what I really want from you out of this one, this is obviously the way we trace it and everything is not going to be the final one that you submit for the AP. This is just to kind of get you used to the procedures. And this being like the first one, I think really, I really want to learn with this one. I think once you get into the next ones after that, you'll have to spend less time obviously going through this kind of exercise with me, and you can just spend more time making them. And obviously you'll once you get this sort of process under your belt, it should just get easier and easier. But we do want the first one to be good. So what I would do is I would do this face until we feel good about it, and then I would use that as my opportunity then to sort of springboard into the other ones, and then I just, we're going to be in a mass production sort of rate. I'm going to come back again. This is the lightest. This is the sap green light. Again, almost everything gets some sap green light. That way I'm starting to get to the point now where the texture of my paper is starting to fill up. It definitely looks really, really bright. The color is really sort of starting to pop a little bit, which is ultimately where we want to be at. Again, preserve your brightest areas. If you put too much color over your brightest areas, and they're supposed to be white, you'll never be able to really get them back. But in and around here on the eyebrow, and again, like the detail of that eyebrow, that'll really happen with our last layer of color. So I'm just coming in here with just a little bit of this green in and around the temple over here. But again, it might be even hard for you to even see how much it's changing on the video, because I am pressing very light and I am working with really a soft touch, so nothing ends up looking too streaky or messed up. And if you're looking at it, I'm changing directions a lot. I'm doing the little circles, a little variety. So again, your sap green, I should sharpen my pencil at this point, but your sap green is really going to be hit up on almost all of your face, except for the very, very brightest white spots. And you'll also see that, again, the lighter colors almost start working like a blending stump and start smoothing out some of those other areas that had more color on them. And the surface should slowly get a little bit smoother. This time I'm going now with my Kelly green. That would be that second sort of lightish green. It's a little bit darker. Adding a little bit of that through the forehead and through the temple, but I don't want this to look like a stripe of color. All right, so be careful that you really have like light edges. As the paper starts getting more and more wax on it, it'll be easier to kind of not have your marks so rough on the page, but you still do want to kind of take it easy and make sure one thing blends into another so it doesn't look like you could see like where one color starts and the other one ends. I'm doing some in the darkest part of the eyes here, in the sort of corner of the orbital bone. I got a little bit on the bridge of the nose. I'm not going to go crazy over there. Really just a little bit right here. I think it could use a little just punch up. Definitely over the areas that are dark. You should hit up all the dark areas with this Kelly green. And, you know, in this upper part of the lip, for sure I'm going to start getting a little bit of that. This corner of the mouth for sure. Just a little bit of a hint. And you can see still how important that first layer of white is, because those little details that I did in white are still kind of holding up over there, and that's important. So, you know, keep in mind that that very first part of the drawing, when you retrace this and do this again, like for the real one, you really want to make sure that you get a really accurate looking black and white version of this to start with. If your original drawing looks good in black and white, just like the portrait I did when I started this, I mean, if we had left it in black and white, I mean, I think some people would have been like, oh, that looks good and that's a finished drawing. So we want it at that level of completion before we really start in with extra color. So I haven't really added any of that here or into my lightest sections. Now I'm going to switch over. This time I'm going with the Prussian green. Prussian green is really just to knock up some of the darkness in here. So I'm really using it sparingly. Like in this case, I'm going to use it right on the lid here. We get some darkness. All right. We got in the corner of the eye and the sort of, you know, tear duct, eye muscle, eyelid kind of area. Put a little bit in there. I think I really want to kind of darken up this area a little bit, so I'm adding just a little bit more in there. I'm going to kind of help my creases here that I originally did in black. I'm going to give them a little bit while I have that sharp point of my Kelly green. Definitely some in the corner of the eye. Just some of that. All right. A little tiny bit here. And a little bit on the underneath. And here in the nostril, sort of upper lip sort of area. Down in the shaded area, down here in this jawline, definitely a bunch. And what I'm going to tell you now at this point, I'm going to kind of use a little bit of that, and I'm going to start doing a little bit of your eyebrow. Really just kind of getting some of the little, like, tiny baby hairs and a little bit of that value in there. I don't want it to all seem like one shade of black or the dark green. I want it to have a little bit of depth. And, you know, if you look at your actual eyebrow, there's some light grays, some darker grays, some medium grays in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just adding a little bit of the Prussian green to kind of give me the start of those things. I'm not going to get a bunch of detail, but you can see how I'm kind of like building up a little bit of that brow. This side you don't see as much, but you should get a little bit of color. I'll give it a little bit of color. All right, now I'm coming in with the dark green. My dark green, what I'm going to do with my dark green is I'm going to start now, after my third layer of color here, really kind of filling in a little bit, even texture-wise, trying to put in a little bit of what's going on in the hair. I'll even kind of do some of your edges and your sort of baby hairs. I'm going to kind of add a little bit of that to that. Obviously, we're going to have to come in with a much darker green at some point. But, you know, again, there's some depth. There's some variety of mark in here. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of bringing in a little bit of that and trying to do just even some of the subtlest little things, little lines and baby hairs, just so it gives it more realistic sort of depth. So that's happening a little bit with that dark green. I'm going to use a little bit of dark green right on the edge of that brow. I'm going to use a little bit, and this is the dark green again, in your actual eyebrow, just for texture. And that I'm really trying to do intentionally, not straight and perfect. And again, I'm going to kind of give it a couple little spots in there. I'm going to put a little dark green in the actual color part of your eye. I hadn't touched that since the very beginning, and I think it needs just a little touch of green into it. Corners of your eye with a nice sharp point. You can come back in here and kind of get those creases, but really those little detail things, that's an important little element. You want to make sure you have a nice point on your pencil. I would recommend, if you have it at home, to use a hand sharpener. You'll just get a lot more life out of your colored pencils. If you put an electric sharpener, it pretty much grinds them down pretty fast. So again, try for electric. I get a little bit darker in here, definitely a little bit darker right into the lip area. Right in here in the shaded shadow area. At this point, you should be in full Hulk form. All right, so I've got basically all that. It feels almost done. It's not all the way there. This is really, you know, my what I would be my last pass. I would get in here. Just gonna add a little bit more white to blend. Let's probably make it a little bit too bright over there, but I'm gonna come back with a little bit more green. Again, it's always easy to come back and make things a little bit darker. It becomes more challenging to come back and make it lighter. Now this area that's going to be mostly just white, you know, I'm going to kind of almost fill that in. It's fine for us to still see the grain. Some of my kids in the past, they love to use the blending stump on this and really kind of mush it together. I am two ways on this. Sometimes I like to see the little touch in the mark making, and sometimes I've seen them all blended out and they look really great too. So that I'll leave as sort of a personal choice. But I would not, I repeat, I would not use a blending stump on this until I was done layering all my colors and totally happy with the way it looked. If you're not sure, I would tell you don't use a blending stump unless I've taken a look at it and given you the thumbs up. The reason is that once you mash it all into the paper with the blending stump and smooth it all out, what happens is it becomes really like a glassy, smooth surface. And with that, you're not going to be able to add more color. The only thing that you'll be able to really do is come in with some like hard line black or dark green. And honestly, the paper will be too smooth for you to even be able to pick up on that. So what I would tell you is that no blending stump unless you feel like this is done. And if it's done, you could do a little bit. I might do a little bit just to demonstrate for you, but I'm more of a proponent of trying to make it look soft and blended and smooth with just the pencil marks. Put a little bit more streakiness right here in the lip. A little touch there, a little bit of white there. And again, if you're going over white in an area that's dark, you're not going to see much of a difference, and that's why it's important to sort of preserve your light areas early in the picture. I'm going to come in and just punch this up with just a little bit more color, blend up my edges a little bit with my lightest green. Probably should sharpen this pencil, but you're getting the free version. Next color. Maybe just my last pass. I'm barely adding a little bit in and just kind of giving it just a little bit more color in the areas I feel like I'm just not 100% happy with yet. All right. Now, issues if stuff is not as dark as you want it to be. Let's just say at this juncture, I got some stuff that it just, you know what, I need it to be just a little bit darker. And when I go over it with dark green, it's really not as dark as I'd like it to be. The inclination would take the black out and start working with black. I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is I want you to start with crimson red. Try that first. Crimson red is the opposite of the dark green, and you know, in conjunction with the dark green, what it should do is help lower the intensity. So before I get in there with any of the black and stuff like that, I want to kind of use a little bit of that. I'm putting a little bit, you can see it kind of almost looks red in the hair, but what happens is that with green on top of that, it's just going to read as a slightly darker green. So by mixing the opposite, in this case red and green are opposites on the color wheel, by mixing the opposites, what happens is it lowers the intensity of that color. All right, and that'll start giving me a darker, sort of murkier version. So if I can't make my dark green dark enough, this is a case where a little bit of that red is a lot better than black, because what happens is that black, you know, that processed like color black is really sort of heavy, and when you put it with, you know, against color, it stands out a lot, which sometimes is what you want, but other times it kind of looks a little unnatural. Now we're making you a green, you know, a green color, so that's pretty unnatural. But what I'm doing with the red is I'm using the red to sort of darken up my darker areas, and it's going to end up being for a better, ultimately, way that you want to look at it. If you look at it and you add red to this, and at any point it looks like too red, just go over that red with dark green, and it should read pretty black, pretty dark. All right. Now, I'm pretty much at the edge where I think I'm going to be done with this. So this is the only time now where I'll kind of take out the black and use a little bit of black. This, when you use black, really, really sparingly, all right? A little bit goes a long way, and you know, you can very easily ruin this thing with too much. So in here, I'm sort of picking up on some of my, you know, most, I guess, easiest to see and darkest hair, and a little bit just around the crown over there, and I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to go like baby hair crazy or anything else like that. Be careful when you do this, because when you do with the black is that if you go back over it later on with green, you can very easily make this look bad. It'll smear badly. It'll look like a mess on your forehead, especially over here with the white where I just did these baby hairs. I am not going to mess with that section again at all. That is literally, that's it for it. I'll come in here. I won't do the full eyebrow. I'm just going to pick out some of the darkest hairs in the darkest spots on them. And again, they know it's eyebrows. You don't have to go crazy over here. I might put just a little touch of black in the eye, but I won't make it all jet black. That really fine little thing. I feel pretty good about that. Maybe just a little tiny little bit right in there, corner of the mouth, a couple of those things. And in all honesty, I feel like I don't want to do anything else on this. Plus, it's lunchtime for me. So I want you to work on this. We'll talk a little bit more about what to do in these areas. We want to test out colors and sort of like sample them and try different things and get you feeling good. But I feel like we should experiment with this, get our flower looking good, get our border looking good. We'll talk about it in the next couple days. Do this week, and then next week we feel good. we start the whole official reel one of that. All right. Hope that was helpful. I'll talk to you later.